This week on The Futurists, Monty Munford.
Even though I'm a bit terrified of generative AI, I am not going to ignore it, and I am not going to bemoan it. I'm going to be part of it, and I want other people to be part of it as well.
All right, well, welcome back to The Futurist. This week, we are bringing one of our mates onto the show. Welcome back, Rob.
Hi, good to see you, Brett.
We're recording a ton of stuff lately, so a lot of good content in the can. But today, we are bringing on a friend of ours, an unconventional futurist, a international man of mystery.
I think of him as the unfuturist.
The unfuturist, and a world-renowned journalist, has done work with the BBC amongst others, and obviously on the speaking circuit and so forth. Monty Munford, welcome to The Futurists.
Thank you, Brett. It's lovely to see you on screen as opposed to in the flesh. You were at my club a couple of weeks ago.
Well,
right?
we did. We did catch up in London, a couple of weeks ago, which was great. It's been a while, and of course, we had a bit of a reunion of sorts of a bunch of speaking guys on the speaking circuit as well. So, which is always good fun.
Okay, which club in London? For the curious,
the Century Club. Yes.
The Century Club. It's for the cool guys, Rob.
Nice.
So you have Soho House down the road, the Groucho Club, which is the literary club, but the Century Club is a bit media, but it's got the best rooftop terrace in London. It's like amazing, actually. Just by Piccadilly Circus.
Right on. That sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime. Anytime I will host you there.
Here in LA, we're finally starting to copy that idea of a club, and it makes a good deal of sense because there are a lot of people in LA who don't want to go to a restaurant because they'll get hassled.
Absolutely.
And they're doing the same concept. It's basically they just lifted the concepts from London and replicated it here. Private club.
I mean, to be honest, if you go to about 5 members club within 100 meters, it's great. But I like the Century, But I like the idea of the unfuturists, Rob. I was going to call myself the reluctant futurist, just like the reluctant fundamentalist.
That's exactly how I think of you. You look at all these novel technologies with kind of a questioning mind. You look at them and you say, well, hang on a second here. Let's rethink this. Let's be cautious about how we proceed. There's so much new technology coming at us now. It feels like a flood, right? And I often wonder how much of this stuff we want or need. What's your take on the current, put your finger on the pulse and tell us, how are things from your viewpoint in London right now?
Well, I think that I have had probably about 5 years of trying to do as many analog things as possible, because before the pandemic, I was going into shops. I wasn't using apps. I collect my own food. I buy my own clothes, because I thought there was a storm coming, and I think that's clearly been accelerated by the pandemic. Yeah, and people are getting used to living. I mean, people are kind of quite happy to let this technology reign, generative AI, because that is the word, narrowly disruptive, and I think it's already disruptive. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's beyond disruption now. It's almost like overwhelm. I think people have been shocked into submission. We're stunned by the new, and the pandemic was a part of that, where we start to begin to become passive. We just accept these new things that are thrust on us.
Well, that's probably a good point. We just normally cover off some news items, Monty. So let's do that quickly, and then we'll dive back into the conversation. I had a news item which appeared in the New York Times this week, which is news of in a new study, researchers used a device to connect the brain of a paralyzed man back to through his damaged spinal cord using a cortical modem or digital bridge, bypassing injured sections of his spinal cord, enabling him to walk. He's been paralyzed for 12 years. So this is, this is a long-term injury. The gentleman in question, he's based in Switzerland. His name is Gert Jahn, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology helped build these special cortical modems or cortical modem technology to enable him to walk again, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's astounding. So it's a cortical modem that enables a paralyzed person to walk. That's quite a recovery.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, bright news here. I got a couple of news items as well for you, Brett, this week.
Sure.
It might be fun to share. First one is RoboCop. And I'm not kidding you. Here in Los Angeles, the LA Police Department got a donation of a quadruped unmanned ground vehicle that we would all call a robot dog. You've seen them from Boston Dynamics, those scary things that kind of walk relentlessly, a little bit like the Terminator. So the police got this thing as a gift, and the LA City Council had to vote whether or not to allow the police to use it. And they did. They just voted 8-4 to accept the donation of a 4-legged robot dog for the use by the LA City Police in their SWAT department. Now, they haven't described what it's going to do, but they did say that it will not ever be used for lethal situations, and it won't be loaded with lethal weapons. Thanks for that, because I really don't want a robot dog with guns coming after me.
Thank you for your cooperation. Yeah.
And for those who are interested in buying one, these come at the hefty price point of $278,000. So that's quite a donation. LA Police is interesting in the sense that they've been testing lots of different technologies, from license plate readers to drones. There was a moment in about 10 years ago when the city of Seattle had bought a fleet of drones that the citizens rejected. They resisted that. And so they ended up donating to the Los Angeles Police, who very happily accepted them. So here we have it, RoboCop. Next story is Blood Boy. Blood Boy, this is really kind of gruesome and weird. There is a multimillionaire tech entrepreneur, a guy named Brian Johnson, is here on the West Coast. He's about 45 years old, and he wants to reverse aging. And he has been experimenting quite publicly and quite openly with every type of rejuvenation technology that's available.
Yeah,
he's been willing to spend $2 million a year to do this. But his latest gambit is to transfer blood from his son. He has a 17-year-old son, and they transfer a liter of blood at a time from the son to the 45-year-old father. But they don't stop there. They then take the blood from the 45-year-old father and transfer it to his 70-year-old father. So we've got 3 generations of blood transfusions happening, and they literally take the liquid plasma followed by red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And this is kind of an extraordinary process that he's documenting. So it's not like it's a secret or anything, but there is this kind of creepy vampire vibe to it. And it's not helped by the fact that a lot of tech entrepreneurs have been talking about, speculating about this kind of thing, and it just sounds like the kind of weird thing, a weird, creepy rich person.
Well, you had that Peter Thiel, new blood thing, young blood thing. What was it called? The Ambrosia, where but that's out of business now because it was shut down by the FDA. But there does appear to be therapeutic benefits from.
The science is yet unproven, though. This is like way out there, right? So there's plenty of scientists who are like, hang on, that's a little bit risky.
Wasn't there a story about the Rolling Stones doing that years ago, going to Switzerland to get blood transfusions?
That would certainly explain how Keith Richards managed to stay upright.
His biggest problem is his alcohol blood content. Right?
That's right. He's preserved. He's already embalmed. So the last story here is actually quite timely because, in Los Angeles, we're having a Writers Guild strike. And among the elements of that strike is a protest against the advent of AI in the screenwriting process. The writers want to be able to control it. They're not seeking to ban it, but that is part of their objections. That's the first union labor action against automation like that, against AI. Well, as it turns out, another group has been displaced already. So today we have the first company that has fired its entire staff and replaced them by a chatbot. There's a call center, a call line for the National Eating Disorder Association. And this week, they fired their entire staff. The staff had been under a great deal of stress since the COVID pandemic, dealing with people who have eating disorders. They get about 70,000 calls a month, and they do provide very important support for them because some of those people require multiple calls, multiple interventions. And the staff themselves were feeling kind of stressed out, and so they decided to unionize, they voted to unionize. And in a preemptive strike, the management of that association came in and said, no, in fact, we're going to terminate the entire staff and replace you with a chatbot called Tessa that was developed by the University of Washington Medical School. And even the people that developed that chatbot, they're very quick to point out that this will not replace a human in terms of the quality of care or the kind of attentiveness. It's not ChatGPT, so it's not as responsive. It's just this pre-scripted bot. So there's a lot of questions being raised right now about whether this is an adequate solution. At any rate, that's happening here. So from the West Coast of the United States, we've got all these crazy stories this week.
You know, the end of collective bargaining or the limits on collective bargaining and attack on trade unions in the 1970s is one of the biggest reasons why wage growth has basically been stagnant in the United States and the UK, arguably, you know, since the 1980s.
Yep.
So for an economy that praises the free market so frequently, limiting the rights of employees to negotiate better rates and better quality of employment and better conditions is not very free market in my thinking. So,
well, you know, it's interesting. It's a measure how much we've been conditioned to think in this neoconservative way. You know, right. The neoliberal policy, their view is, you know, it's all about private enterprise and reducing the role of government and government interventions. And of course, that's been the prevailing economic theory in the U.S. since the 70s, and as you point out. And we can trace income inequality to that exact same moment: the undoing of unions, the loss of collective bargaining rights, several Supreme Court decisions that are against union organizations. So all that added up together makes it a tough headwind.
You look at what's happening with, the founder of Starbucks in the congressional hearings on this stuff lately. You know, it is a significant problem in the US. But anyway, let's get back to our guest, Monty.
Monty.
So, Monty, have you unionized?
Well, I've always been a union man. There's a great song in the UK charts when I was a kid. I'm a union man and I shall fight for it while I can. So, but I think that's another thing that goes with the future. You know, the beautiful kind of socialist, idealist, utopian society I was expecting. I mean, I went on a kibbutz when I was 22 years of age. It's just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Yeah. You know, the agenda is the same. And I fear, I mean, those are pretty terrible stories that you just said there, Rob, from the West Coast. I mean, whether it's vampires or whether it's something else, I don't know. But, you know, there's not a great deal of good news out there. But so I think, you know, as a reluctant futurist, I've decided not to put my head in the sand, and I've decided to join the show, and I'm going to be part of it.
What do you think, Monty, about the potential for technology-based unemployment generally? You know, Rob introduced the ChatGPT thing. I was watching Corridor Crew, which is a LA group of CGI artists and so forth, engineers, and one of the engineers was demonstrating some new AI-based video processing technology, and he showed that a previous work he'd done, which had taken him an entire year to produce this movie with CGI, he could now do that in 8 days with AI-based tech. You know, so there is definitely. There's definitely going to be broad impact across many areas with AI and sort of the tech non-employment. But you hear a lot of economists argue, well, we've always created new jobs in the past and so forth. But I'm a skeptic when it comes to our ability to create enough jobs quickly enough to replace the speed of which AI is going to disrupt employment. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've been speaking to some experts recently. There's a Danish guy in Copenhagen called Frederick R. Pedersen. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Easy Translate, which you would think, right, they must be right in the crosshairs here. You know what I mean? A translation company. Dun, dun, dun. But this guy, he's got some very interesting ideas. I mean, I was telling him a story about a friend of mine who's 15-year-old had, instead of cheating on ChatGPT, she had put her essay into ChatGPT and said, "Mark my essay." Now that's a little bit of genius, right? Because she comes back with like your diction's okay, your syntax and the typos or whatever, but have you thought about this source, or there's this source on the internet? So basically, she harnessed it. She prompted it as an engineer of sorts to get something better for herself, right? And that's a way of thinking, that I think there's going to be humans involved. So what Frederick is doing with his company is that he's kind of, he's absolutely realizes that they're not pivoting from a translation company. Well, they kind of are to a content company, but creating content and then putting humans in the loop, in so much that, generative AI and the humans in the loop will kind of roll together and create something better. But apart from what he's doing with his company, he was quite interesting that he thinks that the future is open source AI. And instead of it being large language machines, it's more likely going to be small language machines that are probably cheaper, better. I mean, it's pretty expensive to get into ChatGPT, you know what I mean, as it is.
And that's already happening. I mean, in the last 2 months, ever since Meta's Llama model was released into the public domain inadvertently, someone broke the agreement and just posted it on 4chan. And as a result, there's been this proliferation now of open source AI tools, so much so, Monty, that it's impossible to keep up. I was trying to check them all out every day, but there are now more than 100 new products released a day, or 100 new apps released.
No, absolutely.
It's astonishing. And now there's whole newsletters that are devoted to this topic. So you can also fill your inbox with news about new AI things. It's a little bit overwhelming. I want to respond to what you just said about the teenager who was using ChatGPT to improve her writing. So there's no question, right? These tools can be useful. In particular, if you're not a great writer, they can be very useful because they'll make an average writer better. I don't know if they help a good writer that much, but they can improve someone who's below average. But it comes at a cost, and this is one of the things I'm quite curious about, because you have to retool, right? You have to adjust your workflow. You're going to hear this word workflow a lot in the next few months, because everybody around the world is going to have to adapt their workflow to incorporate AI. That means we have to learn new things. And bear in mind, nobody asked for this, right? None of us said, "Oh, gee, I'd like to change the way I do my work." Whether it's an attorney or a coder or a graphic designer or a copywriter or a screenwriter, all these people are going to have to adapt to AI. But you won't do it once. You're going to do it continuously because there's new tools being launched constantly. And so what's happening is we're being put on a treadmill where we have to constantly upgrade and upskill. Now, we've had a couple guests on the show who have been quite blunt about this, saying, yeah, that's how it's going to be. Suck it up, get used to it, because that's the future. I'm just not sure this is a future that everybody wants. I think there are quite a few people who are quite content with their skill level, and we're making a very good living. But now they're finding that they have no choice in the matter. If you want to stay competitive and viable, you're going to have to upskill constantly. What's your take on that?
Well, I would go back to a conversation that I had with Phil Libin probably about 15 years ago. We were, when he was at the early stage of Evernote, and we were just talking at CTIA. I think that's where I met you, Rob, many years ago.
Probably.
God, those were the days. And he was saying that, the future is bright. Knowledge workers such as you and me, we're going to be fine. Entrepreneurial, basically intelligent people. But I fear about the knowledge worker. You know what I mean? I consider myself one. I'm a mentor / angel investor. I'm a part-time VC. I write for The Economist and the BBC and Coin Telegraph and Crypto AM. I've got a massive network that helps people raise money. There's a lot of things. I don't just do one thing. But all of those silos, all those facets or aspects of my so-called career are under huge threat. I mean, what if I think of myself as a kind of scruffy futurist or a scruffy portfolio guy, is that my network is amazing, right? And maybe what my skill is being able to use that network to connect two people that wouldn't normally meet each other. That's very difficult sometimes to connect the right people. And I do it in a certain way, creatively.
It's also very difficult to monetize.
Well, I've always found it okay to monetize, Brett. I'm happy to offer you a webinar offline if you want me to tell you how to do it. You can show me how to raise my fee at speaking events.
No problem.
But what about if ChatGPT goes through my network and comes up with a better way for my network to connect with each other without me? I mean, that's pretty damning. That's pretty bad for me, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm not 22, right? I've managed to change the internet, changed my life because I'd spent the first 15 of my years of my life on the road and trying to have his history and memories, which I look back on with utter love now. I'm glad that I did it when I could. My son's been traveling; he's 20 at university, and he's got the bug of the road as well. But it's a very different road. And I don't want to be an old guy that just says, like it's the devil's work and, it's, ruining humanity. But I'm kind of with you a bit, Rob. You know what I mean? It's not a particularly beautiful future, especially if you don't have any money, especially if you don't have a pot or anything like that. What's the future? I'm probably someone will come up with some genius and I'll tag along. But yeah, it's a difficult time, I think.
The rate of innovation is obviously speeding up, and as you say, like the requirement to update your skills and remain relevant is getting tougher and tougher. And where I find the issue with this is let's take truck drivers. In the States. What is it? 2.5, 3 million transcontinental truck drivers. These are drivers that drive from the East Coast to West Coast all the time. They're at risk from autonomous vehicles at some point in the next decade. And, as, others have pointed out, the ability to take those truck drivers and turn them into coders, what percentage realistically of those truck drivers is going to want to become a programmer? 5%, and so what happens to the others? Well, there might be a transition period for a time where they have to sit in these autonomous vehicles, just babysitting the load or something. But that sort of thing is going to play itself out across the across different industries, and you can't necessarily retrain yourself within your profession either. Within this, it may require you to look at sort of completely different type of work. There's the argument for the gigging economy and things like that, and of course UBI as a mechanism, but it's not straightforward, and a lot of people are going to be challenged by this for sure.
Well, I would add to that. I mean, it's changing behaviour, right? If you, I mean, there's going to be some form of rebellion against this. I think, wasn't there a robot that was hitching across North America and got smashed up? There's.
Oh yeah, welcome. Yeah, that was cute. A cute robot that could hitchhike and then finally demolish the damn thing.
I think I see, the robot delivery vehicles that deliver groceries and stuff. I don't know how in markets like the States they're going to, until we get used to that.
They have those all over LA. I keep seeing teenagers turn them on their side or they flip them over on their head, and then the thing is stuck. It's like a turtle.
Yeah, but I'd go with the behavioural aspect of it all, right? If you're finding it difficult to get a job and maybe UBI will come in or whatever, I mean, what other reason is there for OnlyFans to be probably the biggest growing website on the planet? You know what I mean? People are just saying, right, I can't get a normal job. I'll just put my body on the internet, or I'll do something else just to get some micro.
Well, this is the argument for UBI, right? Universal Basic Income.
Yes.
But of course that has other problems.
We always come back to that. I don't want to get in. I'm going to resist the temptation there. I'm not going to take the bait, Brett, of this time.
Sorry.
We should do a show. We should do a show on the topic.
We should.
Hey, so Monty, one thing we like to do on this show is for our audience to get to know our guests a little bit better. We do a series of short questions. And these are questions that are about you and what inspired you and what got you started. And the idea is to give us short answers. So don't think too much about it.
Munchy.
Brett is the person who administers the poison, so I'm going to defer to Brett here.
Right, looking forward to the toxin.
Here we are for the lightning round. What was the first science fiction you remember being exposed to on TV or books?
My dad took me at a very early age to see 2001 AD at the West End in London, and I still haven't recovered.
2001 A Space Odyssey. I remember seeing it in New Zealand in 1977 with the intermission with some friends, and I lost my ticket during the intermission and had trouble getting back in for the second half. But
oh my God.
What technology has most changed humanity?
Mobile phone.
Name a futurist or entrepreneur that has influenced you and why.
Well, strangely and weirdly, Rob Tercek is the only guy that I've, when I was at a conference 20 years ago, was talking about mobile phone use in Africa. And I thought, that's my dude, because I think like that as well.
That's nice of you to say.
Thank you very much.
It's true, bro. It's true.
Yeah. What is the best prediction an entrepreneur, futurist, or science fiction practitioner has ever made, in your opinion?
Probably The Matrix. I think we're in or The Matrix or The Truman Show. One of those two things. I'm definitely under a hood. I'm definitely a product of a teenager's mind in 2055. I'm 100%. Recent facts have borne that out.
Interesting. And the last one is if you were to pick a science fiction story or some sort of forecast for the future as most representative of the future you hope for, can you identify? I
can't. I think we're doomed. I honestly can't. I mean, quick fire. I can't think of anything that's positive. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Really?
Okay. On that sunny note, we're going to take
positive
a break.
Yeah.
Hang in there, folks, because we'll come back and we'll be more upbeat and optimistic after this break.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcasts, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific, and the FinTech 5. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network, and Next Gen Banker. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. Welcome back to The Futurists. I am your host, Brett King, with my co-host, Rob Tercek. This week in the hot seat is our mutual friend and acquaintance, Monty Munford. Monty, before the break, we were talking about sort of adaptation and so forth. In respect to the impact of various technologies, over the years, you've reported on a lot of this stuff for the BBC and so forth. Are you surprised at the fact that, when looking at these things, from a societal perspective, we tend to be quite unprepared for the changes that these technologies bring upon us. And we tend to debate whether or not things are going to change right up until the point it does change. We had Thomas Frey on the show earlier a few months ago, and he says we're very backward looking as a species in terms of anticipating change and so forth. And you hear the likes of Peter Diamandis talking about the fact that people can't think exponentially. But why is it that we're so bad at really assessing the potential of these technologies and so forth and how they will change society?
Well, there's a question. I mean, it's all about the thing that I've been pretty obsessed about recently is time, right? So I just read, I'm one of the few people on the planet to honestly admit that I've read all 7 books of In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, right?
Wow.
Everyone reads Swan's Way, reads the first one, and then say they've read it, but they've never read it. It's actually it's so amazing that literature that you have to stop reading because it's so beautiful, right? Once you get into it's a story about a bourgeois kid in a bourgeois house that his memory is triggered by eating a piece of Madeleine cake. As I was reading it, I thought, actually, my relationship with time I lived near a bus station when I was a kid. When I could hear the buses reversing, I knew it was midnight and it was time to go to sleep. You know what I mean? So the way that he processes time is pretty much my God in a way, you know. And my name is Monty Munford. My real name is Paul Christopher Munford, and I was christened by a mate at school when I was 11 because he couldn't say my surname properly. So there is no Paul Munford on the internet. There's no Paul Munford. Even my ex-wife couldn't marry me in the name of Paul. But I was reading a New Yorker piece recently that we are different people at different times, right? It's kind of obvious: kid, you know, puberty, middle-aged, father, old. But I think it's interesting that maybe we should name ourselves different names as we go through life. You know, I'm sure, Rob, you've been Robert, and I'm sure, Brett, you've been, you know, Mr. King or whatever.
BK,
you know that. So when it comes to the question, when I'm going around it in a slightly convoluted way, is that because of the nature of memory and the nature of time, and the fact that, as you said, we do look backwards, that it's almost impossible to tell the future, right? You know, I sometimes think that I'm a vessel of time. I am just a vessel of time, and something circular is rolling around me that sometimes I think I can hear the future or see the future, maybe because I've linked that up with a memory that happened about when I was 4 or when I was 12, or these different iterations of oneself, you know. So I think that I don't really want to know the future. You know, I want to make sure the world's...
What sort of a futurist are you?
Well, exactly.
He's the reluctant futurist.
I'm a reluctant futurist, right? But I have a 20-year-old son. You know, I absolutely, totally want to know the future for his sake.
Yeah.
And he'll probably say, like, it's my future, Dad. Do you know what I mean? I'm not that interested. You know, it's my life.
Hey, Monty, let me ask you a question and respond to what you just said, because you're talking about the nature of time. Super good question. And the fact that the only way we can, you know, the only things that exist are the past, our memory of the past, and the present moment. Like there is no future. It's not written yet. It's not like it's a book. It's unfolding, right? And we can influence it as well. But one of the things I've noticed, and I've been thinking about lately, because a PhD student at the University of Indiana contacted me out of the blue and said that he's writing a history of mobile games. And he discovered, to his great interest, that there were mobile games before there was an iPhone. And he somehow tracked me down and said, "You ran the mobile game conference in the 2000s. Can you tell me about mobile games before the iPhone?" And all of a sudden I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've become history. I'm a repository of history. And I had all these old presentations from the game developer conference from the early 2000s before the iPhone, and shared that with him. And we had this kind of fun conversation, which ended up including some of the other people that used to work on that event with me. So I had a chance to rekindle some old conversations. And in that process, what occurred to me is, we've seen this before. Like, Monty, you and I have seen this before. Every time there's one of these new technologies that's being geared up and rolled out, don't you feel like, wait, I know how this movie ends. I've seen this movie. Maybe this is the third or fourth. It's like the Avengers series. You know, it's like same movie again and again and again. But even now, as the tech industry is trying to foist some version of an AI, generative AI, on everybody in some fashion or another, it sort of has the flavor of previous events, previous rollouts of technology. What's your take on that? Do you feel like there's a recurrence of time? Do you see repeating patterns?
Well, I think I used to, right? Because you know, when the internet came along, that changed my life. And then I thought, what's the next thing? It's mobile. What's the next thing? And I mean, like you, Rob, I was at those conferences and the pioneer of mobile games myself. I mean,
yes, of course.
I worked for a localization company and took them into mobile games because we had 2 iPads and we just tested a very basic form of Tomb Raider. And the you know, the telephone wires just were red hot with Vodafone, Orange, even our mutual friend, I think, you know, I've forgotten his name, it's terrible. You know, we were there, you know, but I thought, well, this is, I'm trying to think of it, if I thought of that as bad, that people would be sitting on their phones playing games. Did I think that was bad? I must have done, you know what I mean? But it didn't stop me being part of that revolution. I mean, we worked for an aggregator in 2007. We were stymied by the launch of the iPhone because I did a deal with Vodafone, $2 million a year. test all of their phones, their games on Vodafone Live, Vodafone Global. And we didn't see the iPhone coming as an aggregator and a publisher. We were offered Angry Birds, a 51% share of Angry Birds, for $250,000, and we said no. Of which the Rovio guys used to call us Rovio killer. And now
you're definitely not a futurist then.
A loser. No, yeah. but so I suppose I must have thought it was bad in some respects, but generally I thought it was amazing. And then I saw revolutions being arranged by SMS. I saw, people that couldn't hear being able to communicate with vibration, with text. I thought it was amazing, but I didn't see it putting swaths of knowledge workers or intelligent people out of work. I didn't see that. I mean, that's the thing that, the story that you said about, a whole team being made unemployed or fired, with Tessa or whatever her name is. There isn't even decent AI. There's a lot of bad actors who will say, right, I'll just sack everyone. I'll use that. I mean, customer service is going to suffer. Quality is going to suffer. So I suppose I must have seen, I do think it is that things do revolve, and I think every generation something comes along. But I would go back to the conversation I had with Frederick from Easy Translate earlier this week. He said, it is already happening. It is not happening. He said, I'm at the right of the, at the kind of bridgehead of all this stuff. It has changed everything in the last 3 months. Already it's changed things. And I think we're not talking about the future with generative AI. We're talking about the past. That is the weird thing. We're talking, you're clearly a futurist. I'm a reluctant one. And we're talking about generative AI. It's going to change everything. It has changed everything.
Yeah.
And it's like wildfire. You can pull any story out of any conversation that you have with anyone at a conference, or is together with it, whether they're in fintech or whether they're in any other form of technology. This is utterly transformative, and I know that people are scared of it, and I know that people are saying, great pioneers of the technology are stepping back, but things can't happen too quickly. It doesn't matter if you're 15 or 21. The revolutions that I've seen, have been slower.
What kind of future do you look forward to for your son? When you think about your children, what do you think of the world they're going to live in?
Well, I encourage him to get out there into the world and travel. Right, my son is not a drifter like I've been all my life. He's a driver. He wants to work with animals. He wants to work with data. He's doing zoology at Leeds University. I think he's going to have an amazing life. I don't think he's ever going to get rich. I don't think he even cares. He has, support from my family and his mother's family. He's a lucky boy, and he realizes that he is. So I think he's going to be fine. It's the other sons that I worry about. The ones that haven't got an education, the ones that don't really know what to do with themselves. They don't get that all-important summer job, or they're just drifting around, street corners at night and doing bad things and, getting into impressionable behavior.
We're going down into the spiral again. We've got to pull. We got to pull those guys.
Come on. We've got to be positive.
Sorry.
Man. What about the paralyzed guy that can walk again, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
What about the middle-aged guy who has his young teenage son's blood coursing through his veins?
No, I'm sorry. It's easy. It's easy to do. I don't know. Thank you for pulling me up. I think they're obviously amazing things. You know what I mean? Health-wise, mental health. I think things like that, but mental health has been the buzz phrase since the pandemic.
Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson, said we're on the cusp of, understanding the brain in ways that will enable us to get rid of all mental health conditions, that we have today, or adapt to them. And then
that can't come fast enough.
Yeah,
that can't come because there's an epidemic right now of mania. Hey, Monty, what's going on in the UK with respect to Brexit? Give us like a near-term forecast for the UK. Has Brexit worked out the way it was supposed to?
I put my nail my colours to the mast. I was never a leader. I think.
Okay, that means you can read. That's all that tells me.
Well, it's probably a little bit more complicated. There's people I respect that wanted to, they wanted to leave, probably because of immigration and things like that. But I think it's the biggest, longest suicide note.
Worst economic decision that Britain
Ever.
has made in its lifetime.
Yeah. Now, has the UK reestablished its trade arrangements with Europe, or are they still being hammered out? We kind of lost the thread here because the US stopped covering it.
Well, hopefully generative AI will make those decisions a lot quicker. That may be its one benefit. It might sort out Brexit. Yeah, that's it. That's the takeaway from this discussion, is that generative AI is going to help us with Brexit. It's just slow, man. It's just slow. And it's just, I've got a friend of mine who lives in Enniskillen, which is on the border of Northern Ireland and Ireland. And it's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? If he wants to bring anything over the border, Enniskillen used to be bandit country in the day. Lots of things went across that border that were not, tables and chairs, if you know what I mean. I think that there's a fatigue here of a Conservative Party that is utterly entropic, has been run by buffoons, and everyone's had enough.
Why don't you tell us what you really think?
No, well, the thing about it is like,
how come the opposition can't get it together to come up with a decent candidate?
Well, they've got he's a decent guy. He's got a knighthood. He's a lawyer. He's not very charismatic, but who wants charisma after the charisma that we've had over the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, Boris Johnson had plenty of charisma.
Oh, dude, honestly, I was once in a taxi.
I interviewed Boris Johnson for Breaking Banks a few years ago.
Really?
Before he was Prime Minister. That was fun.
Oh, well, I was in a taxi, but he was Lord Mayor, and I saw him in front of me on my bicycle, and I was very tempted to throw something into his spokes of his wheels, and I sometimes wish I'd done it, like the bloke he should have killed.
Could have solved a big problem for
absolutely
the world.
Yes.
Yeah. Monty, I think you're depressed. I think you're depressed, man. You're like...
I'm not depressed.
No.
I'm in a state of utter joy.
But Monty, here's the thing. So we were promised this bright future, right? The people who were in favor of Brexit spent more than a year telling everyone how it was going to be better, how it would improve national health care. I remember having a conversation with a conservative person in the UK over dinner who said, the UK is going to become like Singapore. We'll reduce the taxes to flat 15%. We're going to become this free trade zone, a center of innovation. And I was like, no kidding. Where's your Lee Kuan Yew? Because you need to have like a benevolent dictator to pull that trick off. And at the time, it was Boris, right? That was the prime minister. But he was very, very sunny. Now, years have passed. The chickens have come home to roost, right? The returns are in. The UK economy is not doing better.
I think it's very simple. And I'll let Monty jump in, but it's very simple. You don't cut off your biggest trading partner.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I'm with you, but what about people in the UK?
Tougher immigration policies.
Has that message sunk in? Have people realized that they were basically lied to? Has that message resonated?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that realise that that in spite of their polarity, that they wish they'd voted differently. But you use Lee in Singapore. I mean, I remember a quote from Anthony Burgess saying, go to the peaceful, unmalarial haven of Lee's Singapore. ... where men with long hair are visibly thrown off the streets and thrown into barber chairs, that type of fascism. Yeah. I think that part of it is definitely part of the UK at the moment. I was driving the other day, just stopped off at a service station near Oxford, and there was a huge orange sign that said, "Thank you for visiting this service station. Your number plate has been taken down and recorded." And it's like, that's not a benevolent dictator. That is a threat. You know what I mean? And there are elements of here, especially on the roads, with so many cameras, like 6 million, speed cameras, that there is a form of an island state after Brexit, right? With the very bad things of it. I'm not. How can I, as a Brentford fan, whose team was in League 2 10 years ago and is about to finish in the top half of the Premiership, how can I be a pessimist? I love the future, especially when it comes to Brentford FC. But there's a feeling here of fatigue.
What about Wrexham and Ryan
yeah, but that's
Reynolds?
not as much. No, dude, that's Wales, mate. This is like proper London. You know what I mean?
Proper London.
Proper London.
So Monty, I do want to sort of bring it back to the futurist stuff.
Yeah,
at this part of the show, before we wrap up, what we like to do is like to get a bit further afield. So, 20, 30 years out, let's get a bit sci-fi. What excites you about that future? What concerns you about that future? What do you think, some of the things we're going to have to deal with over the next 30 years that are going to challenge us are?
Well, I think you're going to have to deal with north v south as opposed to east v west. I think that's going to have to be sorted out. I have a friend who works for an American military contractor, said, forget about, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Terminator. It's already here. They're doing stuff in Somalia where they're choosing a patch of ground and sending drones to kill everything in that area. Coming soon to a Ukraine near you. You know what I mean? That type of thing is going on. But again, on the positive side, if we have kind of cloud computing and we have AI and we have the mind of the human all put together, there's an amazing things. You talk about a world for my son, he's going to live for a long time unless he's unlucky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's going to live for a long time. He's probably going to live for 50 years longer than I have.
Yeah.
There's challenges there. But, the world is a beautiful place, man. The sun comes up every day and it's usually beautiful when it comes up and it's usually beautiful when it goes down. It certainly makes a human think about life as much as someone who's sitting around a fire or smoking a cigarette. You think about fire, you think about warmth. Being human is amazing.
Do you think
right?
do you think these changes will make us more human then? Because it will get us away from the distraction of capitalism and the grind and enable us to explore what it is to be human?
Well, what it might do, Brett, is it might tip it in favour of good over evil. I mean, because that's the dichotomy and that's the world that we live in, this Manichaean world between good and evil, right? I'm good. I think you two are good. Most people I know are good with the odd tosser involved, you know what I mean? But anything that can, it's like you see
flawed, but we try our best.
Yeah, but I don't want it to just be like, oh, that's so flawed. It's so human. It's such a trope, if humanity is beautiful, but it's flawed. Why should it be flawed? Why can't we make it unflawed and make it? That's almost an admission that you're bound by your species or bound by your birth. I don't believe in that. I believe now I'm being really positive, right? Is that I think everyone wants to improve, right? They want to improve the situation of their family. They want to improve their intellect. I'm reading As You Like It by Shakespeare at the moment because I didn't know anything about Rosalind, who sounds like a bit of a bitch, actually. Do you know what I mean? And to be fair, Orlando's a bit of a bitch as well. You know what I mean? But that I've got that to finish when I go back to my flat. You know what I mean? I've got another 8 books that have arrived in the post. Can't wait to get stuck into them. I just read Proust, for God's sake. There's so much that's amazing to be human. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is that even though I'm a bit terrified of generative AI, I am not going to ignore it and I am not going to bemoan it. I'm going to be part of it and I want other people to be part of it as well. And harness this for good, not for bad, because it can certainly be used for bad.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great note, positive note to finish on. Where can people find out more about you, Monty? And I know you're working on you're doing some writing and so forth at the moment. Where can we keep up with what you're working on?
Socials really. It's Munford, M-U-N. By the way, everyone gets it wrong. I bought a wallet at Smithson's on Bond Street about 3 weeks ago, and and that they got my initials wrong there. So it's M-U-N, Monty Munford.
I'll make sure I remember that for my next book.
Just put, and I write a credit in your book, Brett King, and you spell my name wrong as well. I'd forgotten about that.
I already paid my dues for that, bro.
You paid for the dinner. I'll give you that. You know what I mean? But I just wanted to put it out there. You know what I mean?
For the record.
Hey, listen, Rob, I'll come to London. I'll come to LA. Let's be lovely to see you. It's
it
really
would be
nice.
great. It would be great to see you. I'm going to be busy though, because I have to go feed all 7 volumes of Marcel Proust into GPT-4 and ask it to summarize concisely.
You terrible man! You terrible, terrible man!
I'm sure you could ask ChatGPT to do that already. Actually,
honestly, read that book. It's absolutely beautiful. It took me 2 years.
Well, Monty Munford with an N.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on the Futurists, and we wish you all the best for the future. That's it for the Futurists this week. If you've enjoyed the show, give us a shout out on social media. Mention Monty in your tweets or your post. Let us know who you'd like to have on the show as a guest. That helps us to sort of think about the pipeline of shows that we can bring to you guys. And if there's specific parts of the future you'd like us to explore, let us know via social media as well. But our thanks also go out to the team at Provoke Media for their support of the show. Kevin Hershen, our audio engineer, Elizabeth Severance, our producer, and the entire team at Provoke. That's it for the Futurists this week. But you can be sure that we will see you
in the future. Well, that's it for the Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.